we want the world to be fair. Those who do good should have a good outcome for themselves. Those who are bad should have to pay for it. And it makes us angry when the world doesn't work out that way. And this issue, it happens all the time in our lives, is explored this week in the Torah portion concerning the life of Moses. Here's the situation. We are in the end of the wandering in the wilderness. 38 years have passed by. The Jewish people have arrived at the wilderness of Sin. Miriam dies and is buried, and the community was without water. And this is how the Torah describes it. And I have to read the section or it doesn't make any sense, so it's not that long. It says, the community was without water, and they joined against Moses and Aaron. And the people quarreled with Moses, saying, if only we had perished when our brothers perished at the instance of the Lord. And why have you brought the Lord's congregation into this wilderness for us and our beasts to die there? Why did you make us leave Egypt to bring us to the wretched place, a place with no grain or figs or vines or pomegranates? There's not even water to drink. So the Israelites are complaining pretty intensely. So Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the congregation to the entrance of the tent of meeting and fell on their faces. And the glory of the Lord appeared to them, and the Lord spoke to Moses and said, this will be familiar, take the staff and then with Aaron your brother assemble all the community. And in front of them all speak to the rock, and it will yield water. You shall bring forth for them water from the rock for them and its livestock to drink. Moses took the staff from before the Lord as he had commanded him. Then he and Aaron gathered the assembly together in front of the rock and said to them, listen to me, you rebels. Shall we bring forth water for you from this rock? And Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his staff. Water gushed forth in the abundance, and they all drank, and men and beast. And here's what happens. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe in me to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not lead this assembly into the land which I promised to give them. This is one of the most famous stories of the Bible. Every religious school student learns it and misunderstands it. Now, does the punishment fit the crime? I mean, that's basically what we're talking about. In other words, what sin did Moses and Aaron really commit? What did they do that prevented them from fulfilling their ultimate goal to lead the people into the promised land? Why can't they cross the Jordan? Moses and Aaron were beyond faithful. They sacrificed everything for their people and for God. What was the sin? What did they do that was so unforgivable? Now, what happens in Jewish tradition is that the commentators have a field day about it. In fact, there's some commentators who complain that there's too many comments on this. So I'm going to give you some of the obvious ones, and there's nothing I'm giving you that isn't out there. Okay? So here are some of the explanations of why the sin was such a sin, so to speak. Now, Rashi, the commentator, says it's obvious. He is punished for striking the rock instead of speaking to it. Rashi was suggesting that there's a greater miracle speaking to the rock and getting water out of it than striking the rock. Rambam, Maimonides, says that he was punished for losing his temper. He says, listen to me, you rebels. Moses was speaking to the people with disrespect, and this was unforgivable. You don't call the Israelite rebels. You don't show disrespect to the Jewish people, even if you're Moses. Ramban, Nachmanides, says something that's quite intriguing. He says, when Moses says, shall we get water for you out of this rock, it implies, perhaps, that Moses and Aaron are the source of the miracle and not God. So what he did was insulting to God. Sin, you don't get into the promised land. And Rabbi Yosef Albo and others suggest that the sin lay in the fact that Moses and Aaron fled from the congregation and fell on their faces rather than standing their ground. All the suggestions are very intriguing, and there's a lot more to them. And if you want to get a PhD thesis on this, go right ahead. The suggestions are intriguing, but we are still left with this unsettling reality that it seems disproportional. The Israelites have sinned many times, and Moses had prayed on their behalf, and God had forgiven them. Remember, of course, the golden calf. Why not for Moses and Aaron in this situation? Now I want to share with you somebody you've heard about. You've heard me quote him, and I so many of you are students of him as well. This is Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, whose analysis of this is incredible, and it appears to be so relevant. He takes a totally different direction in trying to understand this piece. He says this is not about sinfulness. There's no sin going on. He says this is a story about leadership, not sinfulness. And this is what Sacks writes. He says, one of the most striking features of Judaism is that it's not centered on a single figure, a founder who dominates its entire history. To the contrary, each age gave rise to its own leaders. And they were different from one another, not only in personality, but in the type of leadership they exercise. Sacks methodically goes over, in his study of this, each of the different leaders that arose in Jewish life at different times. And what he's in effect saying is that every generation must have a leader that suits the time. Every generation needs an appropriate leader. And Sacks goes on to say, a leader must be sensitive to the call of the hour, this generation, this chapter in the long story of a people. And because he or she is of a specific generation, even the greatest leader cannot meet the challenges of a different generation. That is not a failing, it is the existential condition of humanity. Sacks died a long time ago. This is too good to be true. This is too good to be true. This is a rabbi's dream. Okay, so, now where does Sacks get this idea? He's a Talmid Chacham. There's no one as smart as Jonathan Sacks, okay? It's based on his very precise reading of the biblical text. And he compares Moses' behavior 38 years prior to this event to the current situation. And we know this story too. We know this story too. Let me read. It's from the book of Exodus. It says, but the people thirsted for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, why do you bring up from Egypt to kill us and our children and livestock with thirst? Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, what shall I do with this people? Before long they will be stoning me. And then the Lord said to Moses, pass before the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, take along the rod with which you struck the Nile, and set out. And I will be standing there before you on the rock of Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will issue from it, and the people will drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. 38 years ago, he strikes the rock. So Sacks he's unbelievable. He says, it sounds so similar, but the first time he's told to strike it, and the second time our situation he's told to speak to it. And so Sacks is saying that Moses didn't understand that the solutions of the past were not the solutions of the present and the future. It's so good. So let me quote Sacks again. I think high holidays, I'm just going to find a Sacks essay and just read it. It's like, he's so much smarter than I am. So this is what he says. He says, Moses' inability to hear this distinction was not a failing. Still, it was not a sin. It was an inescapable consequence of the fact that he was mortal. A figure capable of leading slaves to freedom is not the same as one able to lead free human beings from a nomadic existence to the wilderness, to the conquest and settlement of a land. These are different challenges. and they need different types of leadership. So at the critical moment, Moses did not understand that a new form of leadership was necessary. And this all indicates that it's time to hand over to a new generation. This is no punishment. This is reality. This is about mortality. There comes a time when one must turn the page, and Moses knew it. And he accepted his fate and said absolutely nothing. He doesn't rebel. He says, I get it. Friends, is there a text any more relevant to us than one of our moments in history? Is this a text about Moses or about President Biden? President Biden faces the same issue. Is it his time? Is it his time? It's not about his decency or past accomplishments, which are extraordinary. It's about can he function now in a new reality that he and we confront? So President Biden was asked, would he ever step down? And he replied, if the Lord Almighty came down and said, Joe, get out of the race, I'd get out of the race. And he said, and Lord Almighty is not coming down. That this is not a biblical legend. Biden is not Moses. God does not speak to Biden. But it does not change the question, is it his time? Does he still have the capabilities? Can I still do the job? Am I overvaluing my own importance? He should be asking himself. We are at a moment when these questions need to be answered. Don't ever tell me the Torah isn't relevant. Oh, Rabbi, can you talk about something that's relevant? Give me a break. The Torah never disappoints me. Okay, now I'm going to talk about me. You know, I'm certainly not Moses. And I am not as important as President Biden. But I get the situation. And I'm glad Tom Eisenberg is here. Like 2 years ago this past May, Tom and Joyce were sitting in my office. They're two friends and two incredible leaders. And I said to them, it's time for me to retire. And this is how I saw it. I'm at peace with my service to my congregation. I love the congregation. Done my best. I'm happy about the things I've done, and I'm accepting of all the things I didn't do, or the things I didn't do so well. No pressure. But I understood that we live in an incredibly complicated Jewish world. Congregations need new blood, new ideas, new vision. It's not a rejection of the old at all. It's the possibility of building upon it. You know, I want people to leave. I want people to say when I left, you know, I'm happy he did a good job, not when is he leaving. Is Londi still here? They're going to be confused about me being here for the high holidays, but they'll get over it. Friends, life moves forward. Things change. New challenges arise. There's no greater illusion than the belief in our indispensability. Holding on to the past can blind us to the challenges that lie before us. Our Torah portion is such a powerful lesson about maturity. What does it mean to be a mature person? A person who accepts who and where they are now, who understands the unique challenges of the moment and acts selflessly and responsibly in confronting the future. Let me repeat that. What does it mean to be a mature person? A person who accepts who and where they are now, who understands the unique challenges of the moment and acts selflessly and responsibly in confronting the future. In the end, God gives Moses no choice. President Biden is a great lover of the Jewish people, and I only wish that he would go to a synagogue tomorrow and hear the reading of this portion. I think it would be a blessing to him and our country, and it would certainly give him something to ponder. Shabbat Shalom.